This is a beautiful day.
It is, isn't it? You can hear the birds in the background.
Yeah.
So, will you start first? Tell me your name and spell Harrington, even though I know.
Okay. Patrick D. Harrington, Harrington.
Awesome. Okay. So my first question is, do you remember where you were when you first heard about Coldwater, and before you came down here?
Yes.
How did you come about coming down here?
Yes. My wife was in the Webster Groves Presbyterian Choir, and the choir director was Al Booth. And Al was very fond of us. I had insurance with him, and he invited Marie to bring me down and the family several times, and we never were able to do it. And finally, one cold February day, Marie came home from church on a Sunday and said that Al invited us down to see his place. Why not go? We don't have anything else to do. So we went down and we got to St. Genevieve on Old 61. And I said, okay, where do we go from here? And Marie, my wife, said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, what's the name of the place? Oh, well, I don't know. It's water something. And I said, you don't know where it is and you don't know the name of it? How did you expect us to find it? She said, I don't know. I said, well, we'll stop at a gas station and ask them if they know any resorts. So we were right near a gas station at that corner of 61 and 32. And the tenant there said, no, he didn't know of any resorts around. And there was a farmer there. And he said, well, I live out near Kaufman. And people come by Kaufman and the store there. And on Friday nights, they often need a loaf of bread or a gallon of milk or something to take to their place. And I said, oh, okay, where do they go from Kaufman? Oh, I don't know. They just disappear. And I said, well, what's the name of it? Oh, I don't know that either. And I said, well, I guess we'll go out to Kaufman and find out if the store people know. So we did, and they said, no, they just come in for a few minutes and buy a loaf of bread, and then we don't see them again, and they go down the gravel road here, and that's the last we see them. So we went down the gravel road. It was around 2:30, 3 o'clock on a February afternoon, so it wasn't real bright out, or it was kind of cold. And we started looking at each road as we went down, and the WW, which we are on, was gravel then. It wasn't paved yet, so it was just a gravel road. And we came in this entrance once and saw the big sign up saying, no trespassing, so we drove back out. We didn't think that was it. So around 4 o'clock, I said, well, let's go home. And Marie said, oh, no, let's look some more. And it was almost getting dark at that time. And she said, go back to that place where it said no trespassing. So we went back there and we came down the hill. And we saw the sign at the bottom of the hill, no trespassing. And then Marie said, go on, drive in. There's no one around. It's February. So we drove in, and when we saw the cabins, we immediately knew that we had found it. So we drove around a little and found Al Booth's car parked out in front of a cabin. So I went up to the door of the cabin, and Al Booth didn't answer. It was some other man. And I said, I'm looking for Al Booth. I saw his car out here. And he said, oh, he's in here sleeping on my sofa. And I said, well, could we see him? And he said, sure, he'd like to see you. So we talked with Al for a little while, and it got almost completely dark, and Al said, you got to come down and spend a weekend. He said, we'll let you have our cabin for a whole weekend all to yourselves. So sometime in March, we were able to come down and spend the weekend, and we just loved the place. And we saw all the possibilities of the pool and everything else, the lodge. And the tennis court wasn't there then. There was no tennis court at that time. That was 1962. So when we got through looking at the pool and all around on the way home, we said, we got to have a place there. That is really nice. So we went directly to Al's house, and he said, well, you'll have to, I have been trying to get you come down for 2 or 3 years. And he said, you'll have to get to meet the board and get there okay. And so I'm going to take you over to the president, which was Sam Sprout. Sam Sprout was president then. That was Midge McCord's father. So the board approved us, and around the 1st of June, I came down and met with a contractor from Farmington, and I had 12 pages of diagrams on how I wanted our cabin built. And I asked him to look them over and give me a bid. So he took about 10 or 15 minutes. We were at the lodge, and he said, would $700 be too much? And I said, no. I said, what we would do for $700? Well, he said, we'll put up all the framework and get it so that you can move in. But it won't be finished on the inside or on the outside. There'll be walls up, but they'll just be fiberboard, and you'll still have to put your siding outside and your siding inside. So I said, well, I'd like that very much. So I gave him the plans, and we went to New York City for 2 weeks on vacation. And before we left, we came down here on a weekend before the contractor was coming over, and we took a string, and we were in the woods, deep woods, like what you see back here. And we didn't know exactly where we were. There was no road up here, no circle, nothing, just woods. And we put a place where we thought we'd like the cabin. We don't have any idea if he put it there or if he put it somewhere else. But it was, when we got back, they were putting the roof on. It was that fast. And in 3 weeks, he completed putting the shell on, and we were able to move in. And then Marie and I finished the floors. We got a sander and did the floors in the living room and polyurethane them. And then I put a stairwell in up to the balcony where there are 4 beds up there now. And that was the hayloft, we called it. And the kids wanted to put hay up there, but I would never let them.
How old were your girls?
Linda was 9, and Priscilla was 7, and Nancy was 4.
So they're little.
Yeah. And when Marie and I were working hard on the cabin, why the girls were down by the pond there at the lodge in the creek. And the caretaker's wife said she'd watch over them for us. And she took good care of them. And they just had a ball playing in the creek there while we worked up here.
That's awesome. I had no idea. So what year was this built?
1962.
62.
Yeah.
So same year you became a member, built the cabin, moved in.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
fast.
And we moved in 3 weeks after we got back. Or no, I mean, from the time the carpenter started.
That's fast.
Yeah.
So, we have caretakers that have always been. So do
Yeah.
you remember the? So you remember the caretakers because
I'm
babies.
trying to think of their name. I should know it because they were caretakers for a long time.
Because my first memory is Pat and Shirley, which that was
There was
probably
before her,
yeah,
before them.
yeah.
Uh,
So what was the role of caretakers from the time
the
62?
caretaker then worked 7 days a week, 12 hours a day if he needed to. He'd do anything you wanted. You just treated him with respect, but he was a very handy man, and he was building the cabin up here, the Breeden's cabin, at that time, and he offered to sell that to me if I wanted it, and it was $3,000, and I said no, I didn't want the cabin. I wanted. He said it wouldn't be done for 2 years because he could only work on it when he wasn't busy with club work. So it was going to take him 2 years to put it up. And I said, I want to be in my cabin this summer. So I went over to a lumber and hardware company over in Farmington, asked them if they knew of any contractors that would be willing to put a cabin up. And they were the ones that sent me. And his name was, I can't even, Sells. And I can't think of his first name, Cells. And he's the one that said $700. They worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they had it all done in 3 weeks.
That's impressive.
And all they charged me was $700. Now, to give you some idea though, I checked on how much a carpenter and a helper would normally work per hour. And his normal hour charge was $1.75. His helper made $1.25 an hour. And so, and there was no overtime. Everything was just straight $1.75 or $1.25. And that's what he based his $700 on. Now we got a mason from over in St. Genevieve to put our chimney in. And he asked me what kind of rock I wanted. And I said, oh, just field rock. So he looked around and picked up a few field rocks here. And I said, yes, that's what I want. And he had a whole truckload of them dropped off here. And he only used about 3/4 of them. And then he left the rest because he didn't want to haul them off.
So what did you do with them? Are they around your property?
Yeah, they're a wall on this back part over here.
So I've gotten a feeling from talking to the Roushes and the Walshes that you are the reason for many people from Union Electric
Yes.
and your tennis. So how did you must have talked very highly of Coldwater.
We had the Walshes down 3 or 4 times for overnight with their 2 kids. They had 2 kids, Carol Lee and I can't get his name. My age has gotten
Glenn,
really.
is it was named after his father? John?
No.
No, okay.
Glenn Walsh. Carol Lee and Glenn came with them, and they were a little like my kids were and played together. And they had a wonderful time. They loved coming down here. And finally a cabin came for sale. In fact, there were 2 of them. And they had their choice of either that one or another one. And they bought the one that they're in now. And they've been in the same cabin all the time.
Who else did you tell about Coldwater? Is that how the Roushes?
Well, the Roushes were from Union Electric, and that's where we were from. And John and Betty, John Walsh was Union Electric also. And Phil Roush was Union Electric. And the ones down on the front line, Shukai, yeah. Now, John did more to bring them in than I did. He was good friends with both the Shukais and the Roushes. I knew him, but not very much.
And did you all play tennis? What was the tennis connection?
The tennis connection was John and I were partners at Union Electric, and they had a tournament every year, and John and I used to win the doubles. He was a really good tennis player, and I went along for the ride. But we connected, and we played tennis for probably 20 years together.
Okay, that's a long tennis
Yeah.
run.
Well, now, as I told you, there was no tennis court when I got here.
Yeah, tell me about the tennis court.
Well, one of the other members, the guy that worked for the newspaper, he long time member.
You'll remember.
Yeah, I'll come up with sometime. Anyways, he and two other men and I decided to build a tennis court. And we actually leveled the ground off up there. And then we got a concrete mixer, and we had them dump a load of sand and bring in a truck with tar oil on it. And we mixed the sand and the tar oil and laid the flooring for the tennis court. And it took us all summer to do that. And when we'd be done working on it for a day, we were almost black as black could be. And it's terrible stuff to get off of you. You had to use gasoline.
Did you jump in the pool?
Oh yeah, I'm sure we did. And it was hot, and oh boy, I almost had that guy's name. Anyways, he was a real slave driver. He forced us to go to work every Saturday morning and Sunday morning. And it took us 3 months to get it done, but we got it done.
So is that the same?
It's at the same location,
Okay.
but after 20 or 30 years of use and redoing it 2 or 3 times, because we had to put new surfaces down, they decided to bring in a contractor, and they paid him $26,000 to put a new court in. So he put up new fencing and put a new court in for us. And one of the things that was happening, the trees on the outside of the fencing their roots had shot in, and we had cracks in the court every time after we fixed it.
Yeah.
So it was a real hard job.
So there is a story, and I'm not gonna get the name correct, but there was somewhere on club grounds or very close to club grounds, there was a gentleman who was not a very nice person, maybe.
Yeah, Cowboy Dalton.
Yeah, tell me about Cowboy Dalton.
Well, I didn't know him very well. Actually, my 3 kids and I hiked the creek up to his place. He lived up the creek 4 or 5 miles. It was a long way, and it was very wearing on my kids. They had a hard time. And we got to his cabin, and he had a little dam there, and it wasn't for swimming or anything. It was only about 2 feet deep, but maybe there were fish in there, I don't know. So we yelled and yelled for Cowboy to show himself, and knocked on the door of his cabin, no answer. And we were just about to get ready to leave when he came out with a rifle over his shoulder. And he said, what are you guys doing here on my property, you know, and it scared the hell out of us. Anyways, he mellowed as things went along, and he said, well, you know, I trained a lot of people at Coldwater how to shoot a rifle and how to shoot turkey and game. And he was a guy that took people out hunting. He would show them where the deer were, and they would have a chance to shoot a deer themselves or turkey. And his name was Cowboy Dalton, and he got arrested 2 or 3 times for drunken driving. And then he the forestry people were trying to take him in for something, and he beat up one of them. He was by himself, and Cowboy Dalton beat this guy up, and so all the conservation people and foresters were out to get him. And so they finally surrounded his cabin and finally took him prisoner, and he went to prison for, I don't know, 5 or 10 years.
Did he ever come back?
I think he did. I never saw him after that. But he came back, and he wasn't so troublesome. And he never did anything that I can remember at Coldwater. He was far enough away that I guess he didn't want to hike that far. But he was a bad character. But he was also a mild character that lived by himself, a hermit, so to speak.
So do you know if that building still exists, his house?
I think that it does. I think someone bought it and fixed it up a little bit. But I've not been up there for years.
So what creek and how would you get there?
The main creek, Coldwater Creek.
Okay.
Just hike straight up it.
Okay.
Or you don't have to hike the creek. Part of the way you can be on the road.
Okay.
The
Is that
road
like
goes
past,
up
past
part.
the pool?
Pardon?
Past the pool? Like where the pool... There's Alexander Creek,
Yeah,
and then it feeds into Coldwater Creek.
yeah. And this is on our Coldwater Creek, the main creek, 3 or 4 miles.
Wow.
It wasn't close by at all. It was a full day hike.
Bring your lunch.
Yeah,
Bring
yeah.
bring
The
dinner.
kids love to hike the creek, though. We did it pretty often. They like to turn a rock over and have a salamander or something come out from under it.
I hear a lot of Jimmy Nations.
Yeah,
Well-
Jimmy was a real nice guy too, and he was the postmaster over at the Nation's postal store there, which is now a home. And I think that Joe Kresovic owns it now, but I think he may have it up for sale, but I don't know if he sold it yet. He fixed it up, and he fixed up a house behind it and made it available for people to rent.
Oh, that's cool.
And he's married to one of the Thurman girls.
Okay.
I don't know which one. You know they're twins.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And the Thurmans still have a cabin here, don't they?
Yes.
Okay.
And they've been here long before I was.
Okay. So what number cabin out of the 45 how many cabins were here when you
About
built?
36 or 37
Okay.
when we built. And then the Joneses' cabin was erected, the Breedens' cabin was erected, and the cabin owned by, I don't remember her name now, the lady right next door here.
Wasn't that another nest?
She had a nest there all the time, but she wasn't a nest, and they never got married. She couldn't get married because the will said that as long as she wasn't married to anybody, she could get an inheritance. But if she married, then that went away. So she never married, but she lived with
So she was a
one of
smart
the
lady.
nest boys.
She was smart.
Now she has that up for sale, I understand.
Oh, okay.
Now I'm not sure that, come to think of it. It's Woodward has a cabin.
Woodard Cap.
Yeah, their cabin's up for sale.
Sharon.
Yeah,
Yeah, theirs is for sale. I think this weekend you could tour it.
yeah. She's down.
She is?
She was yesterday.
Oh, I should say hi. I didn't see
Yeah.
Because Cap was married to my Aunt Ginny
Right.
for a very short
And I knew them. I knew Ginny. And,
and she was,
I knew her very well.
I hope, she was an interesting character.
Now she's dead, I understand.
Yes. Barbara died about 2 years ago.
Okay.
Ginny-
Barbara was the heavy one.
Yes. Yes.
But Cap's wife was a very beautiful lady.
Yeah. She turned out to be kind of crazy.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. But
We never had much. Cap was very nice to us. He put a table around a chest of drawers in there so that we could sit at the breakfast table and eat off of it in the cabin.
oh, that's nice.
That's our only dining table in there.
And Cap helped with that.
Cap put it on there.
Yeah. And he was a pilot, I think.
Yes, he was.
For,
And he was crazy about me because he wanted to know all about my World War II experience and the fact that my ship was with a fleet of aircraft carriers.
so what did you do in the?
I was an engineering officer. I got my commission at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City.
I love St. Patrick's. I've been there.
Have you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because my mom's from New York.
Have you ever been up to Columbia?
University?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, down on the Hudson River from Columbia University, which is just a couple blocks, there was an World War I battleship, and they converted that into a school, and it was horrible conditions. And I had been at Penn State for 2 semesters in uniform, and then they sent us all to midshipman school. But there were two schools. One was engineering down on this old battleship, and the other was up at Columbia, and it was in regular Columbia classrooms and dormitories. Well, everybody from Penn State went to the one up where the dormitories were, but for some reason I had taken an engineering course, one engineering course, and they sent me down there. Everybody in the class was with MIT or Rensselaer Polytech or the best engineering schools in the country, and a lot of them had master's degrees in engineering, but every one of them had a degree. And I had had one semester, one course, electrical engineering. For 2 weeks, I was flunking every course. I went up to see the officer of the deck, and I said, I don't belong here. All the people that I have been with for the last year are up at Columbia. I have no idea why I got here except that I took one engineering course. He said, well, I'm sorry, nothing I can do for you. You're going to either have to pass 3 out of 4 of the courses every week or you'll go to boot camp. So every week I was on probation. I passed 3 out of 4, but a lot of guys didn't. And every week, and they'd blow a whistle, and they'd call out the names of the one going to Great Lakes to boot camp, and it'd be 12 or 15 men. I graduated 250 out of 250. I know I didn't pass things. But the funniest thing, you got time to hear?
Yeah, this is great.
This was a great story. We had finals, and everything went fine. And out of my group of 20 originally, we were down to 10. And the leaders of our group said, let's go down to the German American Club now and celebrate. We've had finals, and we're going to become officers in 3 or 4 days. So let's go down and celebrate at the German American Club. I said, well, I don't want to go. I know I didn't pass those tests. There isn't any way I could have passed those tests. And he said, well, come on, you'll be okay. And we'll call the officer of the deck and find out if your name is on the list to retake the test the next day. Okay, I said, I'll do that. So we went down, and about 10 o'clock, I called the officer of the deck. I said, check the list and see if I have to overtake finals. And he came back and said, no, your name isn't on the list, but 3 or 4 of those guys that were with you are on the list, and they better get back here and not be all liquored up. So I couldn't believe it. So at 11:30, I called back again. The same officer of the deck was on duty. And I said, I wish you'd check that list again. I got to be on there. There's no way I could pass all those finals. He looked at the sheet, he came back and he said, God damn it, Harrington, don't you ever call me again now. You're not on the list. So I didn't celebrate much. I wasn't a drinker back then. I was only 19 or 20 years old. Anyways, the next morning, right at around 7:30 or 6:30, like they always did, they blew the whistle and they called my name, just me. And I went up to the officer deck and I said, what is it that you want from me? He said, well, the electrical engineering officer wants to see you. You didn't pass the test, so he's going to give it to you over again. And I said, last night I called and you said my name wasn't on the list. No, he said your name isn't on the list, but you're going to retake the test. So I went in to see the electrical engineering officer. And he looked at me and he said, you know, Patrick, you were the only one that flunked the test, and I'll be damned if I'm going to give it again, so I passed you.
That's awesome.
And I was 250 out of 250
Hey,
academically.
That's all you needed.
Now,
Just have to be
when I was at Penn State, I was a leader, and they put me in charge of the barracks. I had 60 recruits, just like I was, that I drilled every morning and marched to meals and did different things with them, you know. And I was in charge of them. And I'm convinced that they read my records back in school and said, here's a leader. He probably doesn't know a damn thing about engineering, but he's a leader. Now, we need leaders as much as we need engineers, and I'm going to pass him. And I'm convinced that that's what happened, that they passed me all four of them. I was taking 4 courses that they could have flunked me out on. And I got all of them, and I didn't know a goddamn thing about what was going on. I couldn't distinguish one engineering thing from another.
But they needed leaders.
And and after I graduated, they sent me to about 5 more schools. I went to schools for about 6 months, I think it was. Maybe 2 or 3, I don't remember. Anyways, then I got assigned as an engineering officer on a destroyer. And I I was at Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and off the coast of Japan.
Wow.
I spent 3 years in the Navy.
And you made it back.
Yeah. And I came back as a lieutenant. I was an ensign. You get commissioned as an ensign first, and then you become a lieutenant.
When did you meet Marie?
I met Marie in 1948 when I was working for the first company I worked for, which was a cement company. And they had a plant out here in off of where 55 goes. It was down, they had a quarry there and a cement kiln. And they sent me out there. They had 8 different plants, and they sent me to all their different plants to learn what was going on and to make improvements if I could. So while I was there, I met the plant engineer, and he was a little older than I was, well, probably 10 years. Anyways, he became a good friend, and his father was the general manager of the plant. And so his father and mother always had him and the family out for Sunday dinner. So the first thing that happens is they invite me out, and then Joel, the guy's name was, said, get a date for Valentine's dance out at Greenbrier. And I said, Joel, I don't know any ladies here in St. Louis that I could bring out to Greenbrier. And he said, well, what do you want, a blonde or brunette? And I said, I like bronze. And he said, okay, I'll get you a blind date with a blonde. So he got me a date with Marie, and she thought I was 30, and I was really 24, and I thought she was 16, and she was 22. Well, I didn't see her again for a month or two, and I came back out again. They sent me back out for another, I don't know what, something to do. And I called her, and she had just broken up with her boyfriend, so she was glad to go out with me. And we got to have a heavy romance going. And the plant engineer that was my good friend there, that had introduced me to her, he, what was I going to say? Well, he encouraged it. And he arranged for me to stay longer in St. Louis. But eventually I went back to Easton, and then I got to come back out to St. Louis, and we were trying to decide what we were going to do with her in St. Louis and me. And so when we got together the next time, we set a wedding date, and we got married, and then we went back up east and had an apartment there and lived there for 2 years. And I told her finally after 2 years we'd been traveling. They sent me to Memphis for 2 weeks, and I spent 2 months there. And we were having a ball. We just had a wonderful time. At Memphis, the engineers don't wear dirty old clothes and go out and do dirty jobs. They just look at it and point to it and tell a man to do it. And, you know, it's Southern hospitality. Anyways, after 2 years in Easton, Pennsylvania, I told my wife I'd like to come back to St. Louis. Well, she was delighted, of course. And so we came back out here, lived in an apartment down off of on a nice street down South St. Louis. Anyway.
In Soulard?
Huh?
In Soulard? Was it the Soulard, 9th Street?
No, it wasn't Soulard. It was, I'll think of it in a minute. Anyways, we decided to build a house in Kirkwood, which we did. And then in a couple of years, the kids came along. We had 3 girls.
Yes, Linda being the oldest.
Uh-huh.
Yes. That's a great story. I had no idea. And I knew you were in the military, but not to that extent. So any stories? You know, I hear the Nast had a story with like the Jeep like went up the hill and they lost the brakes.
Well, we were the first ones to have a golf cart. Marie was the first one. And then the second one was the Nast. The old Nast, they needed one, and they got one. And those were the first 2 golf carts, but we had one probably 3 or 4 months before anyone else. And it was my wife's. She didn't want to walk anywhere. And so we had that all the time.
I remember that.
Okay.
I remember growing up, and the Harringtons always had the golf cart.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what? Growing up with the girls, how often would you come down here?
Every weekend. The girls loved it as much as we did, and they didn't mind at all not having social affairs at home. They gave those up, and without us even asking them to. They just didn't do them, and they would come down with us every weekend.
So you built this in '62.
Mm-hmm.
The girls were young.
Yeah.
What was it like? Because 55, I don't think was an easy road, right?
There was no 55. No 55. I don't even remember it being thought of. And I can't tell you what year 55 was completed, but I would guess close to 68 or so.
So how did you get from Kirkwood?
61.
61, the whole
Yeah,
way?
the whole way to St. Genevieve, and then B, and B was paved, and then WW, which was gravel.
Was gravel. Would you pack up? Would you come down every weekend? Like the girls would be finishing
Friday night,
school?
we'd come down Friday night, and there were always wrecks on 61 because it was 2-lane, one going one way and the other lane the other lane, and it was just loaded with traffic on Friday nights. and we saw more wrecks than you could ever hope to see.
Do you close up your cabin around the fall, or do you come
Yes.
down here
No,
in the winter?
we're strictly summer because we have no real heating system. We have a big fireplace, and now I have a 220 electric heater, two of them. And Perth stayed the winter down here one winter, and she took and put sheets of plastic over the logs there so as to bring the ceiling down, because you know the heat rises, and we have about a 20-foot ceiling in there. Well, she brought it down to about 8 feet.
Smart. Engineer's daughter.
And she spent the whole winter down here working and painting.
What was she painting?
Her cabins, different cabins. That's one of her big income sources. She's got 3 or 4 going right now.
Interior or exterior?
Both interior and exterior.
So, Linda comes down often. Priscilla, what about Nancy? Does she come down? Does she and
Nancy never did come down very often. She was at Springfield. She's now moved to Connecticut. She lives at Hartford, Connecticut. And she loves it. She's with her daughter and son-in-law up there. Stays in their house, and she takes care of their dogs and does their grocery shopping and cooks some of their meals. And the two of them, Marie and Jordan, they just have a ball. They've been on more vacations than anybody. I've asked Nancy, I said, Nancy, they're always off on a vacation somewhere. How do they get off that off? And she said, they work 12-hour days a lot of times. And she said their companies don't mind at all.
Well, to put it
They just came back from 10 days in Iceland. They've been to Australia, they've been to Hawaii, they've been to Bora Bora.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
Good for them. That's a fun.
yeah.
Travel's good. So being here since 1962, have you? I'm assuming you've gone on and off the board.
Yeah,
So-
I spent 16 straight years on the board.
And what is that like?
Well, back then I enjoyed it, but towards the end I was getting tired of being on the board. And there were younger people that were waiting to get on, were running, and so I eventually got kicked off of it. Anyways, which was fine with me.
'Cause it's a lot.
I put in the 2 trails, the one long trail that's up here, the one that goes out of the lake, the far end of the lake, goes up to a lookout, and the lookout has my name on it, and a plaque saying that this was built by Pat Harrington.
Is that the one where, like, if you are leaving the lodge, like past the tennis courts, and instead of going up to the farm, you go straight? Where there's like a wood, like a bench? No? Okay, so what lookout?
Well, if you go up to the lake, you go past the caretaker's work quarters, and then the lake is up there. And the far end of the lake is where the trail starts,
Okay.
and it's marked. And Linda and Carol Bickle hiked it with their family here this weekend, just yesterday, I guess it was. And she had a can of spray paint. She was complaining that the marks that I had put on the trees weren't showing up too good, so she wanted to brighten them up. So she sprayed them with green paint, which I told her that's what I would want her to use, because I don't want to use something that spoils the woody atmosphere. But the green paint will show up people enough where the trail is, but not spoil the atmosphere.
That's smart. That's smart. Yeah, because sometimes I
So-
drive along and there's like purple and orange, and
Yeah.
it's
Well, they hiked the trail, and the trail goes from the lake up to one of the lookouts, which is right where the I want to say dale. It's a valley. It has a name though. botanical name. I can't think of it. Anyways, uh, it's where we've done a lot of cutting to get rid of the cedar trees.
Those cedar trees can do
Yeah.
some infiltration.
Up there where that they have a big open area, a glade. They call it a glade. And in the glade, they start off the first thing in the spring with Indian paintbrush. Now, there's nowhere else in Missouri that I know of that has any Indian paintbrush, and we've got 2 or 3 acres of it. And every year it blooms, and it's a bright yellow. And most Indian paintbrushes are pink. And there have been people from the Missouri Botanical Garden down to see it, and they say it's a real treasure. And they really like our glade and have advised us on how to take care of it and so forth. Then the trail goes from that lookout over to another lookout that looks out over the farm. And you can see about 20 miles on the first lookout and maybe 10 or 12 on the second one. So they're really good places to just look out over the forest. You don't see anything but forest. They say they see the bell in the church in Kaufman, but I've had binoculars up there and I can't find it. And now the trees have grown enough that it's too high for anybody to see over it.
Wow.
Amy, do you want to go in?
You can go. Yeah, you can come in. Let me pause it.
And we started up past the lake and up to this first lookout that I eventually put up. That was well after Clarence died, but we had the trail going, and then it went across a ridge up there where people used to come in years and years ago. You know, the club had another entrance. Oh yeah, years ago. They didn't come in the entrance we're using now. They had one up above where our trail is, off of WW.
Is that the double crossing?
No, the double crossing is down on the creek down below. Down almost to where the bridge is that you come across when you come up the highway.
So where's the other entrance?
This is on WW, and you go past our present entrance about a half mile, and that's where it is. And it's fenced with a gate locked securely so that no one can come in.
Yeah, it's probably nice to have one entrance to kind of keep an eye.
Yeah, we haven't used the other one the whole time I've been here. The new one is the one we use. Now, we spent a lot of time with a forester laying out the trail. And Clarence, I don't know why, but he kind of dropped out of the project, and I went with the forest a lot to lay it out. And we went on this old road that they used to come in on up there where I'm was telling you about. And we went over to another glade, and I built another lookout there with Mike Elder. Mike and I took the old lumber from the bridge over to the other side that they had torn off and weren't using. It was just old lumber. And we built the 2 lookouts from that old lumber. And we could hardly drive a nail through it. It was oak wood, and it was so hard that we had to get a drill. And we had no electricity, so we had to use a battery drill.
Which only lasted so long.
Yeah, and then a couple, probably 15 years ago, they decided to replace my 2 lookouts with new ones. And they built them almost exactly the same, but brand new lumber.
Wow. So
They have a little plaque on the one up above the lake with my name on it.
I'll have to look for it. So I found maybe 30 slides that were somebody's. There's no name on it. in the club's records, and there was a lot of pictures of a flood or some big storm that took out roads, trees were toppled over, on, somebody's garage was mangled, a walking bridge was mangled. Do you remember? Because I thought I saw 67.
I remember that we had a bad storm. Now, it didn't do any damage to me, but it did flood the garage and flooded the pool, of course. And I don't remember whether it was during swimming season or whether it was maybe a couple months before we filled it for the summer.
Have you ever gotten tracks down here with road closed?
No, I haven't, but I know people have. They've gotten snowed in and they've gotten flooded in. Snowed in more often. Just in the last year or two, they were trapped here for almost 4 days, till Wednesday. They couldn't get out until the highway came and plowed that hill. They could not get up that hill, and they had no plows. So they had to wait for the highway. And that part is not, that road is not owned by us or maintained by us. It's maintained by the highway.
It's a county road?
To the lodge.
Oh. Yeah, that would be fun to be trapped here. As long as nothing was going on at home.
Well, as long as you had enough food. But they were running out of food. 3 or 4 days. I mean, they came down for the weekend and were going home Sunday and couldn't get out of here till Wednesday.
That is, yeah.
Now, I think Gabe might have been here when that happened, but I'm not sure.
Okay. So the board, you sat on the board, which is a thankless job. There's so much work that the board does.
Yeah.
Any other holidays are a big?
Well, I would say that we've been in charge of at least one holiday every year.
Yeah.
Linda has volunteered to do it, and they are just delighted.
What is that? Dad goes for a sail in the pool, summer of '73. So what did you do? You got a sailboat?
Yeah, I had a sailboat, but I couldn't sail it here.
Well,
I sailed it over.
That kind of looks like your sailboat in the.
Oh yeah, it was, wasn't it?
You got.
I guess I put it in one day. I probably got told to get it the hell out of there. Yeah.
Wow, there's a new porch, so that's the porch.
Yeah. Now Priscilla and I built this porch in 3 weekends. We did.
That's impressive.
And you know what? It cost me about $400, and I had a contractor up here, a friend, and we were having drinks out here. I said, "How much would you charge to put this porch up for me?" And he looked it all over, and he finally said, "Well, a little over $3,000."
It's like a $700 house.
Yeah, yeah.
What else? Is this a book of Coldwater?
Yeah.
Wow.
See, we stayed at the lodge while we made plans to build.
So are you a
did you
sailor?
know that?
Are you a sailor?
A little, but not as much as Linda and Nancy are. Linda and Nancy are top-notch sailors. They've sailed out of Miami over to Bikini.
Where's that?
Well, it's now on about 40 miles off the coast of Florida. And they captained a boat and sailed it over there.
Wow.
Open ocean.
I'm glad they made it back.
Oh yeah. Linda was a mariner, Girl Scouts, and she had a troop. And every year she'd take them down to Key West, and they'd hire a boat to go down in the Caribbean and sail. And they had a captain and one-man crew, and the man would fix their meals and so forth. And the girls got to just swim and sunbathe on the boat and learn how a sailboat was sailed.
That's a good. That's a
And
good.
she did that for about 5 or 6 years. Amy went with her every year. They even did it after she no longer was the leader. She loved it so much.
That's beautiful. So there's a lot of holidays that get spent down here. Um,
Do I ever remember one?
do, they're all. What about Halloween? Halloween.
I remember one Halloween in particular. It was when this one member had invited some colored people down in the middle of summer or something. And at that time, that was taboo. And so he felt the pressure, and he decided that he'd, a roundabout way, get back at the club a little bit. So Halloween, they got a hold of a casket, a hearse, and dressed up in tuxedos and blackface. And they came into the lodge on Halloween to parade around with the casket. And it had a candle on it, and they blew that out, and they opened the casket, and the little kids were kind of surrounding the casket looking at it, and out pops one of the boys. Scared the heaven daylights out of them. And that was one of the best Halloweens we ever had. Bill Haynes, your dad, dressed in a metal suit. What do you call those?
Like
Well, anyways, you know what I mean. And he was one of the big hits that week. Yeah, he was one of the big hits that weekend. And we had some really good costumes that weekend. But that hearse and that casket were the biggest.
So right now, I put together some slides with when I was talking about the flood, but in there was the Halloween of like 67 or 68 or 9.
Uh-huh.
And there is a picture of the Tin Man, which I can only assume is my father.
Yeah.
And there's a picture of the casket. It's a big casket.
Oh, yeah. It was a regular casket. And this kid was laying in there in the tuxedo, white-faced. And when they opened it up, the kids just, oh boy, they were scared to death. They didn't know what to make of that. But
yeah.
I remember that one real good. I had a fun time with Halloween a couple of years ago. And I had a different lady friend, and we decided to dress up for Halloween. So we decided that maybe I would be an old man with a cane and have a limp, and she would be leading me around. So we did that, and I took the cane and I kept poking at the little kids as I ran around, and they would scream and holler. And we went the whole way around the circle. It was inside at that time. It wasn't out in the ball field, the dress up and the candy and everything. Everything was inside. So got done, and this was a contest, really. And they called us up and said, "You're first place." we didn't hardly spend any part of money at all.
No, you just showed up with a cane.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. So what about 4th of July? There's been 4th of July that has the fireworks, has it always been like a firework display?
No, it just went on for maybe 10 or 15 years. And my grandson Patrick used to help Gary set it up and shoot it. Now they don't have anybody do that, and so they're not having fireworks.
I remember as a kid the fireworks were a big deal.
They were good. The guy that was in charge of that was Gary Schaefer, and he spent a lot of his own money making a big display. And he had skyrockets that were fantastic, just like downtown.
Yeah, and he'd shoot them off at that little dock on the other side.
Yes, uh-huh.
Yeah.
And Patrick used to be up on the diving tower, and he shot some off from there. Yeah.
Wow.
He had his own little patch up there.
Right. What other holidays? Any other holidays that you remember? Any crazy?
No, I don't remember anything special for any Memorial Day. We always did rifle shooting on
Yeah.
Halloween.
Yeah, here's kids all dressed up Halloween. Halloween was a big deal.
Oh, yes, it still is.
And the square dancing.
Yes. Oh, we joined here, and uh, what's the name of the people who write down here?
Nest?
Yes. They said, come on, you're going to join our square dancing. So this was the old nest. This was Grandpa and Grandmother, not Bill and his wife, but ones before that. And every Friday night, we had to go down there and square dance. If we weren't there, they'd come up and get us and drag us down there. And we would have 2 or 3 squares, and we'd square from maybe 7 o'clock till 9:30. And I'll tell you, you either did it or, boy, you were in trouble.
You learned to square dance.
Yeah, you learned to square dance, and we had lots of fun because we'd do these dances, and we'd meet each other, so to speak, and be all screwed up, and everybody'd be laughing.
What I remember as a kid was the cakewalk.
Yes,
Do they still do the cakewalk?
they did it last night.
They do.
Yeah, they did about 4 cakewalks.
And then the musical chairs. I remember Linda.
Now, they haven't done that for a while,
Okay.
and that always was fun.
And I remember Linda, as a kid, Linda would sometimes, whether she'd run it or she would, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what changes have you seen? Obviously, technology has changed, but what changes have you seen?
The club is entirely different than it was. The holidays used to be really a big carnival. The people in charge went all out to make sure that there was something going on all the time. They'd have ball games, shuffleboard tournaments, tennis tournaments, horseshoe tournaments, and they'd have a greased watermelon down at the pool. They'd have swimming races. I can remember being in swimming races across the pool in the deep end, and diving contests, all kinds of things. All weekend there'd be something going on. And this was because the committee planned it. They had it all planned out. So it was timed and everything. And today you don't get that. You're lucky if you get 2 items that are something to do.
Why do you think that is? Do you think people?
Because we have changed the quality of our membership. When I joined, it was a workman's membership. It was only like $50 a month. Now it's like $2,800 a year. Now you have to pay $10,000 or $12,000 to change a membership. And a cabin sells for $100,000 or $180,000, or now they're asking over $200,000. And these cabins sold for $3,000 back then. And people could afford them. The poor man that was a builder or a engineer on a train, which we had, or
School teacher.
yeah, a school teacher, they could afford a cabin because it only. I could have bought 3 different cabins for $3,000. That's how cheap they were. I put this up for $3,000, by the way. Yeah. After I got all the siding on and the inside all done and everything done, I had only spent $3,000. A deep well, a fireplace with a heatilator, a beautiful fireplace in there. big wide one, you know. And it only cost me $3,000. Now today, if I wanted to sell this, I could easily get over 200. John Bickle said this was the kind of cabin he wished he had. He has a nice one as it is. Anyways, we've gone from a working class, I would call it. I would not have been able to afford a cabin for $180,000. Even today, I wouldn't want to pay that. Anyways, to millionaires. I consider that we have almost a millionaire club here. These people that are buying a cabin for $180,000, they've got to be well-to-do. I mean, that's what you pay for a home a few years ago. Now I have 5 new homes on my block, all of them over 800,000. A couple of them 900. They've gone from, there wasn't a house on the block that would have sold for over 250,000. And now they're putting up all these 800 and 900,000.
And that's your primary residence. This isn't your cabin.
No, this is just a cabin.
Right. I agree with you.
So today we have a much different type of membership. And these people don't want to do things. They want to pay somebody to do it. If a door that makes a squeak, instead of them taking the oil can and changing it, they want somebody to come in and do it for them. They'll pay them $30 or $40. If they want painting done, they hire Priscilla or a painter. Anything they want done, they hire somebody to do it. They don't do it themselves. I did all the work on this cabin. I put all of our paneling on the inside. I did all the floors. I did the stairwell. I did plastic windows for on our new porch out there, so that in the wintertime, the porch would be enclosed. We could use it if we wanted to.
Well, I noticed that, so, you know, I have the membership. My dad passed the membership to me. And because we don't own it, there's no deed.
Right.
A bank's not going to give you a loan on
No.
something that there can be no collateral on it.
Right.
So it has made the divide of you have to be able to write a check.
Yeah.
And for those that want a second home and need to finance it, can't do that.
Yeah.
So it's made the divide. And so, yeah, people just can write checks.
Are really, I don't, they must be millionaires, that's all I can
That-
figure out.
I mean, not to disclose the total, but when we had that assessment for $5,000, I had to make payments.
Yeah.
Because I don't have an extra $5,000
Yeah.
just laying around.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I paid it off, but
Yeah.
yeah, it is. I can see that it's.
It has changed. And the biggest change is the fact that these people don't want to do anything. They don't want to be in charge of a big weekend, a holiday weekend. We're having trouble getting people to go on the board or take a weekend. The board had to divide it up among themselves for a weekend last year because they couldn't get anybody to take it. Now, when we joined, there was always somebody taking it and making a big, big deal out of it. I mean, you really looked forward to it. You really had a good time when it was there.
Yeah, and I think now they're doing 2 families a weekend so that you don't
Yeah.
feel the burden
Right.
of the time. And maybe that's a testament to, time is limited, people work a
Well,
lot.
Linda loves to do it, and she's done it, I bet, 25 times. Yeah, every year. She's never missed a year.
Wow. And Amy and Patrick come down often?
Yeah, yeah. They come down on Saturdays a lot of times, just for the day.
Where do Amy and Patrick live?
They live in Fenton,
Okay.
not too far from Linda.
So St. Louis, so yeah.
Yeah.
Not far at all.
No.
Not far at all. All right, any other question or things that, the scandal, the only scandal of Coldwater is the treasure scandal.
Yeah.
Do you remember? Were you on the board then? Bob Anderson.
I'm thinking I was, but I'm not sure.
That's come up in.
No, I guess not. He wasn't. He was never treasurer when I was on the board, so it couldn't have been when I was on the board.
That came up in my interview with Walsh and Schwartz.
Uh huh.
Because that kind of rocked the foundation.
Well, John is one of my best friends, John Walsh, and we've been that way for 40 years. And as I told you, we were partners at Union Electric, and that's what brought us together. But then they enjoyed coming down here and staying at our cabin for 2 or 3 years before they bought theirs. And then when I heard there was one for, well, there were two of them for sale, and I told John, I said, you ought to buy one of those. And he was very happy to do it. Then Phil Roush or Shook Eye, one of the two, came, and then the other.
Yeah, so you had your Union Electric crew.
Yeah.
There's a lot of relationships here, and it probably makes logical sense because no one puts a cabin for sale,
No.
you know, and it's not on the MLS,
Right.
you know, real estate. So it is friends and family and
Yeah.
you know, acquaintances.
I hope Sharon can find somebody acceptable to buy her cabin. It's a nice cabin. You ever been in it?
Yes,
It's very nice.
it's been several years back.
It's
but-
very, it only has 1 or 2 bedrooms at the most,
right, but that big open room
but that's a nice room.
and it's
And
like,
the
she has a
kitchen's
modern
right there.
kitchen.
Yeah,
She has a very modern kitchen.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Woody and I were good friends,
Yeah.
and
yeah.
he liked to question me about all my war experiences. He was a bluff on World War II.
The other guy who lived here who had the beagle. What was his name?
Was that
Anderson?
Anderson? Yeah, I think Doug Anderson.
Doug. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a character.
Yeah.
Do you remember anything about him? I don't.
No, I think he was buried right over here, not too far from here. He was in one of these local cemeteries.
Oh wow. Did you guys do church at the lodge, or?
He never did. He never went. He never came to church. Bob Reed and I did church for a long time. Before we did it at the lodge, we would do it on the lookout, not the ones that I put up, but one up above the Ewing's cabin.
That
And
would be a beautiful place.
it was
church.
beautiful. The rifle range was downstream from it a little bit. There's a trail to it.
How many people would you get to come to church?
Oh, 5. Not very many.
There's a pretty good crowd for the lodge one, right?
Oh, she's been averaging, I'll bet, 40. I'll bet there's been 40 people at all of her services lately for the last couple of years. Lisa is a very nice person, and so is Ann. They're both, really part of the club that makes good club.
When you, how do you describe Coldwater to a perfect stranger back in St. Louis?
Well, I just had guests down here that had never been here before. I had one family in June and one in July, and they like to swim. I describe with them the biggest swimming pool in the world, and they can't understand that. And I tell them about the rifle range, and we usually always take the first thing is a tour of the grounds. We go up to the rifle range, we go in the lodge, look at it, we go up to the lake, and I tell them about the fishing up there. I tell them about my hiking trail, but we never go on those. That's too difficult.
Do you use any adjectives to describe it? Peaceful.
Not that I can think of regularly.
Okay. I always call it like the perfect getaway because
Yeah,
it's not too far.
right. As I told you, Amy comes down here on a Saturday, and she'll come down Saturday morning and leave Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, and if I keep a toothbrush and a spare clothes, so really,
Yeah.
you could be impromptu and spontaneous and
Right.
run down for dinner,
Yeah.
spend the night, and come back. I think we have keys here.
My girlfriend and I have been coming down Friday morning, and Friday night we go to Chemet for dinner, and she loves that. And it's always expensive, but we have a bottle of wine and a real nice dinner for each of us. And then Saturday, if there's a gravel bar, we'll go to the gravel bar, and then we come home Sunday afternoon or morning.
That's a perfect weekend.
Yeah, we very enjoyed it.
That's perfect. Hi, can you think of anything that you want to make sure gets on record? Or you remember? Or a funny story?
No, I think you've pretty well covered most of my experiences.
Yeah, I did not know you built the cabin. And for $700? That's
Yeah,
the
now,
best.
now let me tell you something. This one here on that hem, and I've got a big bedroom on the other side of this and a bathroom. So we have two bathrooms. And that was Marie and my bedrooms. And it's big, it's like 16 by 18. And then the bathroom, then this port. The door used to be where that window is there. That was the front door. This was all added on, and I changed the door to there and then made this the front
So
door.
you've done some add-ons.
Yeah, and I did this all myself. I had a farmer who didn't know a thing about carpentry. I sent him, I would have him go and cut the wood when I was up high, someplace, and needed a rafter or something. I'd tell him the length and the width and so forth, and he'd go and cut it. And one day I said, get me something that was like 6 feet 5/8 inches. And I didn't hear the saw, and a little time went by, and finally he came back. He said, Mr. Harrington, I don't do eighths. I told him 5/8, and he said, I don't do eighths. He could do a ½ inch or a 1/4 inch, but he didn't know what an eighth was.
Well, I hope you showed him.
I showed him, but he had his two sons help me put the concrete pillars in for all this and for the back porch too.
Wow.
He was the nicest guy. He'd come over here on a Saturday morning and he'd yell from up at the top of the street there, Mr. Harrington, I'm here. He'd always be right on time, very, very congenial, do whatever I asked him.
All right, I think I got enough of history of how you got here and,
Yeah.
and the three girls and
Well, if you think of something more,
yeah.
give me a call.
I'll probably